Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is Jessica Squirrel, and today I will be walking you through how I made this dinosaur card for the Color Throwdown challenge. I started this card using the Little Dino Agenda stamp set from Mama Elephant. I also used ink colors in Nuvo's Polar Ice and Marble Statue, as well as Deep Sea from Lawn Fawn. The first thing I do is place a single dinosaur stamp onto my stamp block. I then grab the lightest color of ink, which in this case is gray. I ink up my stamp and I stamp in different places with that same dinosaur in the same color. I rotate the dinosaur stamp so it's facing different directions, and I even hang some off of the edge because I'm going to be making my own patterned paper. As you can see, that last dinosaur I had just stamped was missing the feet. I tried to stamp over it, which is a risk because you can get double lines, but I still managed to miss the feet. I'm not too concerned with this, as I will be later cutting a smaller rectangle out of this sheet of paper. I'm going in with my next color, which is Polar Ice. Off screen, I actually took that stamp and I stamped it off onto a scrap piece of paper to make sure there wasn't a bunch of gray ink on it before I re-inked it with the blue. I'm going around the same as I did with the gray, stamping things in different positions and even off the edge a bit. I will continue this with various dinosaurs in different ink colors. I always try to start with the lightest color so that I don't have to fully clean my stamp, and instead I can just stamp it off on a scrap piece of paper and then go in with a darker color. If you've never heard of the Color Throwdown challenge before, it is a challenge in which you are challenged to use 3 or 4 colors usually, and you can add neutrals to the mix, but you must include the colors that they provide. For this particular week, it is gray, an ice blue, and a deep blue, which is why those are the main colors of my card. The only other addition of color that I have is the white, and that's fine because it's a neutral. I think this week's color combination is one of my favorites. I absolutely love these colors together. I think it would make a cute baby shower card, or you could use them for some kind of beach card. I think the possibilities are endless, and I don't know, I'm super partial to blue anyway. It's one of my favorite colors, so I really enjoyed using this color combo. I did it again, guys. I stamped something and it did not stamp the right way. I tried to line it up and it double stamped. Thankfully, it's right next to the other one I didn't stamp well, so I'll just do what I can to avoid it when I cut out my rectangle panel. Alright, so here you're starting to see it's looking like a mess. It just is. I'm not worried about this because I am going to cover it with a fairly large sentiment, and that is going to take up most of the middle of the panel. So it doesn't really matter if things are a little bit too close to each other or there's a little bit of an awkward space in between. I'm just doing what I can to the outer edges at this point. I will be going in a minute with the party hat stamp from the same set and filling in the little areas. And here's my little party hat. If you are doing this and you're not making a birthday card, you could do any kind of little image that you have, whether it be hearts or stars or a little tree. It doesn't really matter as long as it goes with the stamps that you're using. I happen to like how it fills out the paper a little better. Also, this technique is great for your little smaller stamp sets that maybe only have a couple of stamps in them. You can use those stamps and stamp them in different colored inks in different directions and get a cute patterned paper look, and then later stamp the bigger image, color it, cut it out, and put it with your sentiment, as I am going to do here. Here I'm going to die cut that paper. I used the Hero Arts Nested A2 rectangle dies. I have a blue panel that is slightly larger than my patterned paper panel and still slightly smaller than my gray card base. Here I use liquid glue to attach the patterned paper that I made onto my blue panel, and then I'm going to attach those onto the gray card base. So here I have my silicone oven mat, a couple scraps of paper, my polar ice, and my deep sea ink. I also have a couple of foam blending tools, and I am going to make a gradient from the polar ice to the deep sea ink. I'm doing this on these scraps of paper so that I can cut out the letters for part of my sentiment. The blend here does not have to be super perfect. Once you cut the letters out, even if it's not the most perfect blend you've ever seen, it actually still looks pretty good. Here you're seeing me check to make sure that when I cut out the letters, there will be about an even amount of the light blue versus the dark blue ink. To cut out the letters, I use Lawn Fawn's Oliver's Stitched ABCs die set. I use these in quite a few of my cards. I just love the little stitching detail on each of the letters. Here I'm placing the letters that I'm going to die cut onto the little scraps of paper. I'm actually doing it in the order that they will appear on the card, just to give some kind of cohesiveness to the word once it's cut out. The word is going to be rarsome. And because there's only one of each of the letters, I'm going to have to run the R through the die cutting machine twice. To ensure that the dies didn't shift when I die cut the pieces, I taped them down with some low tack tape. This is actually washi tape that I had stuck on my shirt a couple times to help it lose some of the tackiness so that it does not rip my paper when I go remove the letters. Look how cute they turned out. I just love this color combination. When I was putting them on the card, I did realize that there were a little bit too many letters in order to put them on the card base normally, with them just being lined up. So how I decided to tackle this was I decided to stagger them so that you would still be able to read the word, and they would all fit on the front of the card. For the rest of my sentiment, I'm going to be using Lawn Fawn's You Are Sublime stamp set, and I'm going to use the two stamps. One says, Have a, and the other says birthday, so that my full sentiment will read, Have a roarsome birthday. Now I am going to stamp the rest of my sentiment. I like to use my stamp positioner for this just to make sure that I have good coverage the first time, since a sentiment is very important that it stamps correctly so that you'll be able to read it. This is the same cardstock that I used for my card base, so the gray matches. I'm taking my anti-static powder tool over the cardstock to keep the embossing powder from sticking where I don't want it to. I'm then laying my stamps down on the paper, only really making sure that I leave enough room so that I may cut the little sentiments out with sentiment strip dies. I am going to stamp this in Versamark ink. I usually stamp it twice just to make sure it has enough ink to get the embossing powder to stick. The embossing powder I'm going to use is the Ranger White embossing powder. And I catch it in the coffee filter, which, as you see there, I actually grabbed an old coffee filter that had orange embossing powder in it. I would not have wanted that to get in my white embossing powder container. I like to cover it a couple times just to ensure that it is fully covered in all the areas and I don't have to go back and fill it in with like a white gel pen or something later. Now here you'll see me take a pokey tool to the center of the A's on my sentiment. And I'm doing this because I felt like the holes were a little bit closed off from the amount of embossing powder that was up there. So I just scratched it off a little bit before I heat set it. To cut my sentiments, I use the Avriel sentiment banner dies. And there's a bunch of different sizes in there. I just kind of went through, laid them out to see which ones gave me the size of banner that I wanted. I then applied some low-tack tape to each die in the paper to make sure that it did not shift during die cutting. Now here's where I try to play around with placement and make sure that I don't want to add anything or take anything away, which in this case, there's not really anything I could take away, maybe just switch out. I did decide that I would like a couple of dinosaurs stamped and colored and added to this card. For the dinosaur, I just picked one of the ones that I had already used for the background or the pattern paper. I had a hard time deciding because I think so many are cute. But after staring at them for several minutes, I decided this might be one of my favorites. Here I used Lawn Fawn's Jellyfish ink. This ink is a Copic safe ink, which is why I used it. I also did not want black lines, as black lines would have, I think, taken away from the rest of the card as there was no black anywhere else. For the main part of the body, I had decided to color it gray, and the Copic colors that I used for this dinosaur and my next dinosaur were W00, W2, and W3. I started coloring the body by laying down the lightest color over the whole body. I then map out the shadows with my midtone. I darken them with my darkest color, and for this one I actually went back in with the midtone a little bit, and then I blended it all out with the lightest color. So to summarize, I went lightest to darkest, back to lightest. Side note, I should say that if you're ever coloring something and you feel like it's just not looking good, it doesn't look like you want it to, sometimes it is best to walk away from the project for a couple minutes. Alcohol inks blend in the fibers of the paper, so by giving it time to fully blend in the paper, sometimes it looks a lot better than when you first start. For the dinosaur spots, I use B95. I don't add any additional colors here as the spots are really too small for that, and I didn't want to make the areas too dark. And I had started to dot the eye with this blue and then thought it looked really weird, so I actually go back in after I die cut it and I use a Faber-Castell fine liner. This Faber-Castell fine liner is in size extra small. For the next one, I actually think I used the small Faber-Castell fine liner instead because that extra small one was just a little bit smaller than I felt was needed. Here I'm just back to trying to figure out where I want everything. Since I added the dinosaur, I had to play around with placement for that too. After I figured it out, I glued the first sentiment strip onto my card where I wanted it. After that, I then swipe everything off the card and replace all of the die cut letters. When it actually came to adhering the letters, I started out in the middle and then worked my way out. That was just so that I didn't run into the issue of there being no room left on one side and way too much room on the other. There was still a little bit more room on the end of the word that I didn't actually intend to be there, but it worked out okay in the end. Now, I realized my dinosaur kind of got lost in the rest of the card, so I decided to pop it up on foam tape just to give it a little bit more dimension and hopefully make it stand out a little from the background. It was at this point that I realized I wanted a second dinosaur, so I pulled out my ink again and I looked through the dinosaur stamp set. I found one that would both fit in the area available as well as look towards the sentiment. And then I stamped it in the exact same ink that I had stamped the previous dinosaur. For the main part of the body, I used the same warm gray colors that I used for the previous dinosaur, which was W00, W2, and W3. I colored it in the exact same way I colored the previous one. For the belly and the stripes on this dinosaur, I used BG10. Again here, I did not use any additional colors as I did not want to make that color too dark. I made sure to dot the eye on this dinosaur with my Faber-Castell fine liner in size small. I finished gluing on the last part of the sentiment with liquid glue, and I then pop up my little dinosaur with foam tape, and then my card is complete. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will be back soon with another card video.